Okay, so 3 hours till exam time.
Yeah.
And
Oh, boy.
yeah, a mountain of reading still staring us in the face.
Yeah,
I could practically feel the stress from here.
I know.
But
Yeah, it can be a little overwhelming.
yeah, but don't worry, we're going to tackle this together.
That's right.
Think of this deep dive as your personalized crash course, guiding you through the most important information.
Exactly. We're going to make sure you extract those golden nuggets.
Yes, golden nuggets of knowledge in the most efficient way possible.
The most efficient way possible.
That's right.
That's the goal.
Okay, so let's unpack this challenge. First things first. What kind of exam are you facing?
Right.
Is it multiple choice essays?
Yeah.
Knowing the format is crucial for directing your study.
Absolutely. It's like, you don't train for a marathon the same way you train for a sprint.
Right.
You need a different approach depending on the challenge ahead.
Exactly.
So, for example, if it's multiple choice, you might prioritize, memorizing key facts and definitions. If it's essays, you need to understand broader concepts and connections.
Totally. Okay, so tell me what jumps out at you from the syllabus or the exam outline. What are the must-know topics that seem to pop up again and again?
Well, looking at the materials you've provided, it seems like there's a heavy emphasis on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That makes sense, considering the overall theme of the course.
Right.
But I'm curious, how comfortable do you feel with that material already? Maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being totally lost and 10 being could teach it in my sleep.
Oh, good question. I'd say I'm at about a 7 on that specific topic.
Okay.
I understand the basics, but there's some nuances that could trip me up.
Right. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
See, identifying those tricky bits early on is half the battle.
For sure.
Now, you've only got 3 hours until exam time.
Okay.
So we need to be ruthless with our priorities.
Absolutely.
Are there any topics you feel confident enough to skip entirely?
There's that section on. It's interesting, but, looking at the past exams you've shared, it doesn't seem to be a major focus.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
Remember, this isn't about reading every single word.
Nope.
We're going for strategic information extraction here.
That's right.
Think of it like packing for a weekend trip. You wouldn't bring your entire wardrobe.
No.
Just the essentials.
Exactly.
Exactly. So, based on your comfort level and the exam format, what if we prioritize these 3 key areas first?
I like it.
Okay.
A focused plan of attack?
Yes, a focused plan of attack. But how do we actually tackle these topics efficiently?
Right.
There's a lot of information packed into these readings.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
That's where strategic reading techniques come into play.
Okay.
Remember, we're not aiming for leisurely reading here.
No.
We're on a mission.
We are on a mission.
We are.
Lay it on me. What's the first move in our strategic reading game plan?
Skimming.
Skimming.
Imagine you're a detective surveying a crime scene. You're not scrutinizing every detail, yet you're looking for those key pieces of evidence.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So what are our clues when we're skimming through academic texts?
Think of those headings and subheadings as your road signs.
Okay.
They tell you what's coming up.
Right.
And help you navigate the information landscape.
They're like the chapter titles in a mystery novel.
Yes.
Giving us hints about what's to unfold.
Exactly.
But let's be honest, sometimes those academic headings can be a bit dry.
They can be a little dry.
How do we make sure they actually stick in our minds?
Try turning them into questions.
Okay.
So, for example, instead of just reading the impact of climate change, ask yourself, what exactly is the impact of climate change?
Oh.
Who is affected? How that active engagement helps the information sink in.
Great tip. So we're looking at headings, turning them into questions. What else should we be doing during this skimming phase?
Don't forget those introductions and conclusions. They're like the executive summary of each section.
Right.
Giving you the big picture view without getting bogged down in the nitty-gritty details.
So they're like the before and after photos of a home renovation project.
Exactly.
You see the overall transformation without having to watch every step of the process.
Exactly. And while you're skimming, keep an eye out for those key terms, the ones that are bolded, italicized, or defined within the text.
Okay.
Those are your VIPs.
Gotcha.
Terms that are likely to pop up on the exam.
So it's like we're creating a mental glossary as we go, noting those terms that are essential for understanding the material.
Exactly.
Got it.
Now let's add another tool to our strategic reading arsenal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Scanning.
Scanning. Tell me more about this technique.
Imagine you're searching for a specific recipe in a cookbook.
Okay.
You're not reading the entire book. You're flipping through the pages looking for that one dish.
So it's about quickly locating specific information like dates, names, or statistics
Precisely.
that we know are important for the exam.
Exactly. Your syllabus and those key topics we identified earlier will be your guideposts here.
Okay.
Look for those keywords, those nuggets of information that answer those questions we formulated from the headings.
Okay, the skimming and scanning duo is starting to make sense.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what happens if we hit a section that's just really dense or confusing.
Right.
It's like hitting a roadblock on our information highway.
Don't get stuck in a rut.
Okay.
If you find yourself spending too much time on a challenging passage market and move on,
Okay.
you could always come back to it later if time allows.
Yeah, right.
Remember, the goal is to cover as much ground as possible.
Right. We've got to be strategic with our time here.
Yes,
So we've done our initial reconnaissance with skimming and scanning.
exactly.
We've got a sense of the key players and the overall landscape. What's next in our last-minute study adventure?
Well, now we've got to.
Yeah. Okay, so we've mapped out our priorities
Right.
and equipped ourselves with some killer skimming and scanning techniques.
Yes.
But I have a confession.
Okay.
Sometimes even after I've read something.
It feels like the information just slips right through my brain.
Oh, yeah.
How do we make sure these key concepts actually stick?
That's where active learning comes in.
Active learning.
Yeah, think of it like this reading is like watching a cooking show.
Okay.
But active learning is like actually getting in the kitchen and trying the recipe yourself.
Okay, that analogy is making my stomach grumble.
I know, right?
But I get your point.
Yeah.
Passive reading is like being a spectator, while active learning is about rolling up our sleeves and getting our hands dirty with the information.
Exactly.
But with just a few hours to go, what are some of the most effective active learning techniques
Right.
that we can use?
One of the simplest yet most powerful techniques is summarizing.
Summarizing.
After you finish reading a section or even just a paragraph,
Okay.
take a moment to close the book and explain the main points in your own words, either out loud or in writing.
So it's like giving a mini presentation to an invisible audience.
Yes.
Pretending we're the professor teaching this material.
Exactly. And here's a little trick. Imagine you're explaining this to someone who knows nothing about the subject.
Okay.
How would you break it down in a way that's clear and engaging?
Ah, so it's about simplifying language, finding those everyday examples, and really making sure we understand the core concepts.
Exactly.
I like it, but what if we get stuck?
Uh-huh.
What if we try to summarize something and realize we don't quite get it?
That's a good sign. It means you're actively engaging with the material.
Okay.
Go back to the text, reread those tricky parts, and try again.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to go back and forth between reading and summarizing until you feel confident you've grasped the main ideas.
It's like working out a knot in our understanding,
Yes.
slowly but surely untangling those complex concepts.
Yeah.
Speaking of knots, sometimes I feel like my brain gets all tangled up when I try to remember a bunch of facts and figures.
Right.
Any tips for boosting our memory power in a time crunch?
Absolutely. Flashcards are your secret weapon here.
Flashcards.
But don't just mindlessly copy information onto cards. The key is to turn those facts into questions that you can then test yourself on.
So instead of just writing photosynthesis on one side and the definition on the other,
Right.
we might write, what is the process by which plants convert light energy into chemical energy?
Exactly. That active recall process, forcing your brain to retrieve the information, strengthens those neural pathways
Okay.
and helps cement the knowledge in your long-term memory.
It's like we're creating our own personalized trivia game.
Yes.
Turning those dry facts into engaging questions that challenge us to remember the information.
Exactly.
Okay, flashcards are a classic study tool.
They are.
But I'm curious, are there any less conventional techniques that might be helpful in this kind of last-minute situation?
Have you ever heard of the Feynman technique?
The Feynman technique.
It's a brilliant method for identifying those gaps in your understanding and really solidifying your knowledge.
Intriguing. Tell me more about this Feynman fellow.
Well, it's named after the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman, who was famous for his ability to explain complex concepts in simple, intuitive terms.
Okay.
The technique involves pretending you're teaching the material to a child using everyday language and examples.
Okay.
As you explain it, you'll inevitably stumble upon those areas where you're a bit fuzzy on the details.
Uh-huh.
Those are the areas you need to revisit and study more carefully.
So it's like we're turning into those science educators who can make even the most complicated topics fun and accessible for everyone.
Exactly.
I love that idea. But let's be realistic. Sometimes when we're studying under pressure, our brains just feel like they're hitting a wall.
Right.
How do we stay focused and avoid burning out in these final hours before the exam?
You're absolutely right. Mental fatigue is a real challenge when you're cramming. That's why taking breaks is not a luxury, it's a necessity.
Breaks, but I don't have time for breaks.
Even short breaks can do wonders for your focus and concentration.
Really?
Think of your brain like a muscle. It needs rest and recovery to perform at its best. Pushing yourself relentlessly without breaks will only lead to exhaustion and diminishing returns.
Okay.
It's like trying to drive a car for hours on end without stopping for fuel.
Right.
Eventually, you'll run out of gas and be stranded on the side of the road.
Right. Those mental pit stops are crucial for keeping our cognitive engines running smoothly.
Exactly.
But I'm curious, what kind of breaks are most effective?
Right.
Should we be scrolling through social media, watching funny videos, or just closing our eyes and zoning out?
The key is to choose activities that truly help you disconnect from your studies and recharge your mental batteries.
Okay.
Get up and move your body, step outside for some fresh air, listen to a favorite song, meditate for a few minutes, or chat with a friend about something completely unrelated to the exam.
So it's about finding those activities that help us shift gears, clear our minds, and come back to our studies feeling refreshed and re-energized.
Exactly.
Okay, breaks are officially on the agenda.
Good.
What other tips do you have for maximizing our brain power in these final hours?
Hydration and nutrition are often overlooked, but incredibly important.
Okay.
Think of water as the lubricant that keeps your mental gears turning smoothly.
Okay.
Keep a water bottle handy and sip on it throughout your study session. And don't forget to fuel your brain with healthy snacks, nuts, fruits, yogurt.
Right.
They'll provide a steady stream of energy and help you avoid those dreaded sugar crashes.
Right. We can't expect our brains to function at their best if we're running on fumes.
Exactly.
Okay. Water, healthy snacks, and strategic breaks. Check, 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 check.
Check, check, check.
What else can we do to make sure all this information actually sticks in our long-term memory?
Have you ever heard of spaced repetition?
Spaced repetition.
It's a technique that leverages the way our brains naturally forget information over time.
Spaced repetition sounds intriguing, but also a bit daunting when you're on a time crunch. How does it work?
The basic idea is that you review material at increasing intervals.
Okay.
So you might study something once, then review it again after a short break.
Okay.
Then again the next day, then again a week later, and so on. Each time you revisit the information, those neural pathways get reinforced,
Right.
making the knowledge more durable and resistant to forgetting.
So it's like we're giving our brains those gentle reminders spaced out strategically to make sure those important concepts stay fresh in our minds.
Exactly.
But how do we actually implement spaced repetition when we're cramming for an exam?
You can use flashcards or even just a simple list of key concepts.
Okay.
As you're studying, mark the topics that you find challenging or that you want to make sure you remember. Then schedule those mini review sessions throughout your remaining study time. Even a quick 5-minute review can make a big difference.
Okay, so we're not just studying once and hoping for the best. We're building in those spaced repetitions to outsmart our forgetful brains.
Exactly.
I like it now. What about study groups?
Yes.
Are they a help or a hindrance in this kind of last-minute scenario?
Study groups can be fantastic for collaborative learning, but they can also easily devolve into unproductive social gatherings if you're not careful.
All right, we don't want to turn our study session into a gossip fest when every minute counts.
Exactly.
So if we are going to do a study group, how do we make sure it's actually helpful?
The key is to be super organized and goal-oriented.
Okay.
Before you even agree on the specific topics, you'll be covering the materials you'll be using and the amount of time you'll spend on each section. You might even want to assign different topics to each member so that everyone can share their expertise and insights.
So it's about leveraging the power of teamwork, but in a structured and efficient way.
Precisely.
Got it. Now, are there any resources or tools that are often overlooked but can be super valuable in these final hours before the exam?
Practice exams are a must if you can get your hands on them.
Practice exams.
Think of them as your dress rehearsal before the big performance.
Okay.
They'll give you a feel for the format, the style of questions, and the overall level of difficulty you can expect.
It's like getting a sneak peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
A chance to practice our moves before we hit the stage.
Okay.
But I'm curious, what's the best way to use practice exams effectively?
Right.
Should we just try to answer every question perfectly, or is there a more strategic approach?
The most valuable part of a practice exam isn't just getting the right answers.
Okay.
It's analyzing your mistakes and identifying those areas where you need to focus your remaining study efforts.
Gotcha.
So don't just breeze through the questions.
Okay.
Really take your time. Try to understand the logic behind each answer choice and make note of those tricky concepts that trip you up.
So it's not about beating ourselves up for getting things wrong. It's about using those mistakes as valuable learning opportunities to refine our understanding and target those weak spots.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, we've talked about a lot of practical strategies for absorbing information and boosting our memory power.
Right.
But what about the emotional side of things?
Yes.
How do we manage that pre-exam anxiety and make sure those nerves don't get the best of us?
You're absolutely right. Mental well-being is just as important as intellectual preparation when it comes to exam success.
Fair.
It's easy to let stress and anxiety take over, but there are things you can do to stay calm, focused, and confident.
Okay, I'm all ears. Share those anxiety-busting secrets with us. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
Prioritizing like pros.
Yes.
Mastering the art of strategic reading. And activating our brains with some seriously effective learning techniques.
Absolutely.
We've even talked about the importance of self-care and managing those pre-exam jitters.
It's all connected.
But I'm always up for learning even more, especially when it comes to outsmarting those tricky exams.
Of course.
What other tricks do you have up your sleeve?
Well, one technique that's often overlooked but incredibly powerful is the concept of teaching the material to someone else.
Teaching. But I'm the one cramming for the exam.
Right.
Who am I supposed to teach my dog?
It doesn't have to be a formal lecture.
Okay.
Just imagine you're explaining the concepts to a friend, a family member, or even just an invisible audience.
So it's about forcing myself to articulate the information out loud, as if I'm the one in charge of making it all make sense.
Exactly. The act of teaching forces you to organize the information in a logical way, to anticipate questions, to come up with clear examples and explanations. It's like taking those swirling thoughts in your head and turning them into a well-structured presentation.
And in the process, you're bound to uncover those gaps in your own understanding.
Absolutely.
It's like those moments when you think you know something until you try to explain it to someone else and suddenly realize you're a bit fuzzy on the details.
Precisely, teaching, even if it's just to an imaginary student, is a fantastic way to test your knowledge, identify your weak spots, and solidify your grasp of the material. It's like those practice presentations you do before the real deal. They help you iron out the kinks and deliver a much smoother performance.
Okay, so teaching is officially added to my last-minute study toolkit.
Good.
What other secrets can you share to help us supercharge our memories and ace this exam?
Have you ever dabbled in the world of mnemonic devices?
Mnemonics.
They're like little memory hacks that help your brain make connections and remember information more easily.
I remember using those back in high school to memorize lists and formulas.
Right.
ROYGBIV for the colors of the rainbow. Anyone.
Exactly. And they can be incredibly helpful in this kind of situation where you're trying to absorb a lot of information quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
The key is to get creative and find ways to make the material more memorable.
So how can we create our own mnemonics?
It's all about finding those patterns and connections that resonate with you.
Okay.
You could use rhyme, songs, acronyms, or even visual imagery, whatever helps those facts stick in your mind.
Okay.
For example, if you're trying to remember the order of something, maybe you create a silly sentence using the first letter of each item.
Right.
Or if you're dealing with visual information, try sketching a diagram or a mind map that links those concepts together in a memorable way.
It's like we're turning our brains into playful explorers, discovering those hidden pathways and connections that make learning fun and engaging. Okay, mnemonic devices, check. What else should we be doing in these final hours leading up to the exam?
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the exam itself.
Okay.
Even with all this preparation, it's natural to feel those pre-exam jitters creeping in.
Oh, yeah.
So let's discuss some strategies for taming those nerves and approaching the exam with a clear and focused mind.
Oh, those pre-exam nerves are the worst.
I know.
I've definitely had those moments where my heart is racing, my palms are sweating, and my brain feels like it's gone completely blank.
It's a common experience, but it's important to remember that you are not alone.
Okay.
And there are things you can do to calm those nerves and channel that nervous energy into a positive force.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me those anxiety-busting secrets.
First and foremost, remind yourself that you've prepared as best you could.
Right.
You've put in the work, you've followed the strategies we've discussed, and now it's time to trust yourself and your abilities.
Right. It's about acknowledging our efforts and giving ourselves permission to feel confident in what we've learned.
Exactly. Now let's talk about some practical strategies for those final hours and moments leading up to the exam.
Okay.
Make sure you get a good night's sleep. That's when your brain consolidates all those newly acquired memories.
Right.
Eat a nourishing breakfast. You need that fuel to power your mental engine.
Okay.
And avoid any last-minute cramming. It'll only increase your anxiety and make it harder to focus.
So we're setting ourselves up for success with those basic self-care practices, sleep, food, and a calm mindset.
Exactly.
Got it. But what about when we're actually sitting in that exam room staring at those questions?
Right.
Any tips for staying focused and avoiding those mental meltdowns?
Absolutely. Deep breathing is your superpower here.
Deep breathing.
When you feel those nerves creeping in, take a few slow, deep breaths to calm your nervous system and bring yourself back to the present moment.
It's like hitting the pause button on our anxiety, giving ourselves a moment to regroup and refocus.
Exactly. And remember to read each question carefully, underlining key words and phrases to make sure you understand what's being asked. Don't be afraid to skip questions that stump you and come back to them later. Sometimes revisiting a question with fresh eyes can spark that aha moment.
The classic skip and return strategy, a lifesaver in those time-crunched exam situations.
Absolutely.
What other exam-taking wisdom can you share?
If you start to feel overwhelmed, don't panic.
Okay.
Close your eyes for a moment, take a few deep breaths, and remind yourself that you've got this, you've prepared well, you've got the tools, and you're capable of succeeding.
It's like giving ourselves a pep talk, reminding ourselves of our strengths and our ability to handle whatever challenges come our way.
Exactly. Any final words of advice before we send our listener off to conquer this exam?
I love it. Any final words of advice? Yes.
Absolutely. Before you submit that exam, take a few minutes to review your answers. Look for any careless mistakes, double-check any calculations, and make sure you've answered all the questions completely.
Okay.
You might even spot something you missed or remember a crucial detail that slipped your mind.
All right, those final checks are like the proofreading stage of a writing assignment. They can make a big difference in the overall quality of our work.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a few final thoughts.
I'm all ears.
First, remember that this exam is just one moment in time. It doesn't define your worth, your intelligence, or your potential.
Right.
Do your best, put those strategies into action, and then let it go.
That's such an important reminder. We can get so caught up in the pressure that we forget to keep things in perspective.
Second, reflect on the study experience. What worked well for you? What would you do differently next time? Use this as an opportunity for growth and learning. It's all part of the journey.
Love that it's about turning even a stressful experience into a valuable learning opportunity.
And finally, be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
You've been through a lot, you've put in the effort, and you deserve to celebrate your accomplishments regardless of the outcome.
That's such a beautiful sentiment. Self-compassion is essential, especially after a challenging experience.
Well said now, listener. It's time for you to face that exam head-on, armed with a wealth of knowledge strategies and a calm, confident mindset. We believe in you.
Yes, you've got this. Remember all those key principles we've discussed. Prioritize ruthlessly. Engage actively. Leverage those memory-boosting techniques. Take care of yourself, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Good luck on your exam. We're rooting for you.